The greatest suffering is not knowing why you suffer. Carl Jung. And maybe that's what's been haunting you. Not the noise, not the chaos, but the quiet ache behind your smile, that subtle disconnection from yourself. You laugh, you perform, you give and give until nothing's left for you. But deep down, in the parts of you no one sees, something whispers, "This isn't it." You can't name it. You can't explain it. But it's there like a soft pull inward, not to become someone new, but to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That's not collapse. That's awakening. The pain isn't the enemy. It's the messenger, the invitation, the turning point. It doesn't come to break you, it comes to bring you back. Back to the voice you silenced. Back to the boundaries you blurred. Back to the truth you buried to be loved. And if something inside you is stirring now, don't turn away. This isn't just a video. It's a mirror, a moment of stillness, a quiet doorway back to yourself. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to explain. Just breathe. And if you're ready, let's walk together. Not toward perfection, but toward what's real. Toward what's been waiting for you all along. There's a moment in life, maybe it comes quietly. Maybe it crashes through you when something shifts. The world hasn't changed, but something inside you no longer fits. You wake up in the middle of the night, not because of a sound, but because of a stillness, a silence so loud, it almost hums. At first, you think it's stress, fatigue, maybe just another bad day. But as time passes, that feeling doesn't leave. It deepens. It wraps around you like fog. You try to shake it off, scroll a little longer, work a little harder, talk to someone, distract yourself, push it down, but it waits. It always waits. And the more you ignore it, the heavier it gets, until even joy feels muted, like something sacred is trying to reach you, and you keep turning away. That ache in your chest, that strange hollowness, that's not confusing. That's not dysfunctional. That's your unconscious trying to speak. Carl Jung didn't believe people fall apart because they're broken. He believed they fell apart because they're being called to break open. There is a part of you, a quiet, ancient part, that remembers who you really are. Not the version others know, not the roles you play, but the one that existed before the world told you who to become. And that part, it's been whispering to you for years. But the world teaches us to ignore the whisper, to keep pushing, to stay on the treadmill of performance and approval. So we label the whisper as weakness, as an inconvenience, as something to be fixed. But what if it's not? What if that ache is the very thing that saves you? It's strange how the world reacts when you start listening to that voice. People say you've changed, that you've become distant, that something's off. But maybe what's off is everything you used to tolerate. This isn't about becoming someone new. This is about finally becoming someone real. Because there comes a moment when staying asleep hurts more than waking up. And once you hear that inner call, really hear it, you can't unhear it. You start to notice the masks, the noise, the ways you've abandoned yourself just to keep the peace. And slowly, the performance begins to crack. And beneath that crack, there you are. Jung called it the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole again. And it doesn't begin with fanfare. It begins with quiet rebellion, with choosing to feel, choosing to listen, choosing not to betray yourself anymore. It's not about rejecting the world. It's about finally including yourself in it. And when you do, something shifts. Not on the outside, but inside. A kind of gravity pulls you inward. Life no longer feels like something to chase, but something to meet, to sit with, to understand. That's not a breakdown. That's a breakthrough. So if you're feeling that call, if something deep inside you is starting to stir, don't rush past it. Don't numb it. Don't dismiss it as nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's your soul saying, come home. And that home isn't a place. It's knowing, a remembering, a quiet return to everything you are and everything you were never allowed to be. It starts here. And as we go deeper, we begin to remember something we were never taught, that our worth was never outside of us to begin with. There's a lie we've all been sold, a quiet, subtle lie, dressed up as common sense, that our worth is something to earn. From the time we were young, we learned to measure ourselves in fragments, grades, awards, compliments, likes, attention, performance. We got good at it, smiling when praised, shrinking when criticized, letting others define our value by what they saw or didn't. And somewhere along the way, we forgot who we were before anyone ever told us what we should be. You start to believe you're only as valuable as your usefulness, that your worth is tied to how well you play the part. Be the good one, the reliable one, the one who never complains, the one who gives and gives and gives. But let me tell you something. Your worth was never in question. Not really. It was never about what you do, how much you give, or how many people approve. It was always there, quiet, constant, untouched. But when you've been taught to earn love, you start performing for it. And every time someone praises you, it feels like air. Every time they ignore you, it feels like suffocation. It becomes an addiction chasing significance from the outside. But the truth is, anything you chase will own you, and anything external can be taken away. So what happens when you stop chasing? What happens when your self-worth stops depending on applause? At first, it's terrifying. You feel lost, untethered, empty, because the scaffolding of your identity begins to fall away. But beneath that, something starts to grow. Not louder, not shinier, but deeper. A knowing. You begin to walk into rooms differently. Not because you think you're better, but because you no longer think you're less. You no longer wait to be chosen. You choose yourself. You no longer ask, "Am I enough?" You realize you always were. And that changes everything. The energy shifts. You stop over-explaining. Stop justifying. Stop apologizing for simply existing. You stop entertaining what doesn't respect you. And the irony is, the world responds. Not because you're trying to impress it, but because you're no longer trying at all. People feel it even if they can't explain it. That presence, that is calm. That quiet confidence that says, I know who I am. I don't need you to. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. When you reclaim your worth from the hands of others, you stop being reactive. You stop being controlled by who stays and who leaves. You stop handing your peace to those who never earned your trust. You start to see clearly, and you begin to ask different questions. Not, how can I be more? But where did I forget who I am? Not, why don't they see my value? But why did I ever stop seeing it myself? Because when your worth comes from within, it no longer sways with circumstance. It's not shaken by a bad day or a cold shoulder. It becomes the ground you walk on. And yes, there will be moments where you forget again. Where the old hunger returns, the hunger to prove, to please, to be seen. But now, you'll catch yourself, you'll breathe, and you'll remember, you are not here to convince anyone of your value. You are here to embody it. And from that place, from that inner clarity, something starts to awaken that cannot be faked. A kind of power that isn't about control. A kind of freedom that isn't about escape. A kind of love that begins with you. And as we go further, we begin to see what that love really looks like. Not a mask, not a performance, but a return to something sacred that never left. There's a moment in every honest life when the masks start to feel too heavy. You look around and suddenly realize the version of you that everyone admires isn't really you. It's the one who learned how to blend in, how to stay safe, how to be who the world needs, not who you actually are. Carl Jung called this the false self, the persona, a mask we wear to function, to be accepted, to survive. And for a time, it works. You smile when expected. You nod. You perform. You conform. You play the part so well. You forget it's a part. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet truth waits. A truth that says, this isn't it. That's where the path of individuation begins. Not in ambition, not in success, but in that sacred breakdown when everything false begins to unravel. And make no mistake, it does unravel. Because to individuate is not to add more layers, it's to shed them, to peel away the noise, the roles, the compulsions to please, the addiction to approval. The stories you were handed about who you should be and who you're not allowed to be. It's a stripping down, a burning away. And it hurts, because the mask gave you comfort. It gave you belonging. It gave you predictability in a world that never promised safety. But at some point, the price becomes too high. Because every time you betray who you really are to keep the mask intact, you bleed, silently, inwardly. And one day, the bleeding becomes unbearable. So you choose a different path, a quieter one, a lonelier one, the path of coming back to yourself. Jung called it individuation, not perfection, not enlightenment, just the truth. And truth by its nature, is not always pleasant. Because when you start walking this path, you will grieve. You will grieve the version of you that was loved, but only when you were convenient. You will grieve the relationships built on roles, not reality. You will grieve the life you built on a foundation that was never truly yours. But through that grief, you begin to remember. You remember the parts of you abandoned to fit in. You remember the instincts you silenced to be accepted. You remember the voice inside that said, "This isn't me. There's more." And slowly, as you reclaim those pieces, something profound starts to shift. You stop asking for permission to be whole. You stop negotiating your truth to stay in someone else's comfort zone. You stop contorting to be palatable, digestible, likable, because now you are choosing yourself. And that choice, though it might cost you, the crowd gives you something far greater. It gives you back to you. That's what real self-esteem is. Not a performance, not arrogance, not a mask. It's the quiet knowing that you've stopped abandoning yourself. And once you reach that place, you don't just feel stronger. You feel sovereign. You walk different. You speak differently, because you are no longer performing. You are no longer leaking energy trying to be what you're not. And the paradox is, when you finally accept who you are, without shame, without justification, life starts to align. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you do. You're no longer looking for wholeness outside of you. You're living from it. And that is the beginning of a new kind of power. The kind that doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't need the spotlight. It just is. And from here, the journey deepens. Because now that the masks are falling, you begin to hear what was beneath them all along. There's a language beneath language. It speaks not in words, but in symbols, in images, in sudden instincts, in feelings that come out of nowhere but seem to carry the weight of something ancient. We call it the unconscious, but it's not unconscious because it's asleep. It's unconscious because we've forgotten how to listen. Have you ever had a dream that shook you, even if you didn't understand why, or a gut feeling that warned you long before logic caught up, or a moment where your body knew something was wrong, but your mind talked you out of it? That's not a coincidence. That's not irrationality. That's the part of you that remembers. Carl Jung didn't believe the unconscious was some chaotic underworld filled with shadows and disorder. He believed it was intelligent, alive, even a wise inner guide that knows who you are beneath the conditioning, beneath the masks, beneath the performance. But we weren't taught to trust it. We were taught to fear it, suppress it, pathologize it. In a world that worships certainty and logic, intuition feels like rebellion. But the unconscious doesn't stop speaking just because we stop listening. It keeps showing up in dreams, in impulses, in sudden waves of emotion. And if we keep ignoring it, it speaks louder. Anxiety, nightmares, depression, confusion. All of these, Jung believed, are not flaws in the psyche, but signals. They're alarms, calling us back to ourselves. And when you stop running from those signals, something begins to soften. You stop fighting with your own nature. You begin to notice the patterns, the dreams that repeat, the types of people you're drawn to, the situations you keep recreating. You begin to ask, not, what's wrong with me, but what is this trying to show me? That shift, that curiosity opens the door. And behind that door is not chaos, but clarity. You start to realize that what you thought were random emotional storms were actually buried truths trying to rise. You realize the body keeps score, the psyche keeps memory, and the unconscious, it keeps your blueprint. It holds the map. And when you follow it not blindly, but with respect, you begin to align. And alignment isn't about perfection. It's about no longer betraying what you know deep down. That's where real power comes from. Not from controlling everything outside of you, but from being rooted within. Because when you trust your inner signals, when you stop second-guessing what you feel in favor of what looks good on paper, you move differently. You stop needing to be told who you are. You start remembering. That kind of remembering is sacred. And yes, it takes practice. To tune in, to discern, to learn the rhythm of your own unconscious. But the more you listen, the more you hear, and what you hear begins to guide you not like a GPS, but like a compass. Not telling you where to go, but showing you what feels true. You don't need all the answers. You just need to stop silencing the questions, because the unconscious, as Jung saw it, is not here to hurt you. It's here to help you become whole. And the more whole you become, the more honest, the more integrated, the less life feels like a fight. You're not swimming against the current anymore. You are the current. And from that place, you're ready to meet the parts of you you've been most afraid to see. There are parts of you you've buried so deep, you almost forgot they were there. Moments of rage you've swallowed in silence. Thoughts you judged too dark to admit. Feelings you told yourself were wrong: envy, pride, jealousy, spite. Maybe someone once told you those parts made you bad, unworthy, broken, and maybe to survive. You believed them, so you locked them away. You learned how to smile through the ache, how to nod when you want to scream, how to say, "It's fine," when everything in you was crumbling. You became someone likable, at the cost of being real. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or exile in order to be accepted. But here's the truth. He understood what we bury doesn't die. It festers, it grows, and eventually, it finds its way back to the surface through projection, through pain, through patterns that repeat no matter how much we try to change. You ever wonder why the same types of people keep showing up in your life? Why do the same wounds keep reopening? Why do the same situations keep circling back? It's not a coincidence. It's not bad luck. It's your shadow asking to be seen. And the more you run from it, the louder it becomes. You see, we chase outside what we've rejected inside. If you've disowned your anger, you'll attract those who provoke it. If you've repressed your need for boundaries, you'll draw in those who violate them. If you've silenced your voice, you'll find yourself in spaces where no one listens. It's not punishment, it's invitation. Life keeps bringing us back to the parts of ourselves we've abandoned. But here's the paradox. Your shadow is not your enemy. It's your access to wholeness. Because inside your anger is clarity. Inside your fear is instinct. Inside your envy is desire pointing toward the life you secretly wish you had the courage to claim. Jung didn't teach us to fix the shadow. He taught us to face it, to sit with it, to say, I see you. You are part of me too. And in that moment, something sacred happens. Not a healing that makes you perfect, but a reunion that makes you real. You begin to feel whole again, not because you've cleaned yourself up, but because you've stopped dividing yourself in two. You stop trying to be only the light. You begin to walk with your darkness, not as a weight, but as a guide. Because when you hold your shadow in the light of awareness, it softens. It stops screaming. Stop sabotaging. Stop acting out. It doesn't need to fight for your attention anymore because you're finally listening. And this is where true self-esteem is born. Not from achievements, not from affirmation, but from knowing there is nothing inside of you are afraid to face. That's what makes a person powerful, not the absence of shadow, but the willingness to meet it, to walk through the shame, to touch the wounds, to say, even this belongs. And the world might not applaud it. I might not understand it, but you will feel it. A deep, steady strength rising from within. Not because you've become something new, but because you've finally become all of you. And from that place, you begin to live differently. You begin to choose differently, not to protect a mask, but to honor the truth. There comes a time when holding on hurts more than letting go, but we hold on anyway. Not because we're weak, not because we don't see the truth, but because something in us, something old, maybe even inherited, believes that letting go means failure. We were taught to endure, to stick it out, to prove our worth through suffering. So we stay in places that drain us, in relationships that silence us, in roles that slowly erase us. And we call it strength. But what if it's not strength? What if real strength is the quiet decision to stop bleeding for what never loved you back? Letting go is not a collapse. It's not surrender. It's choosing peace over performance. Carl Jung once said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. And so often, what we cling to isn't love, it's a pattern, a familiar pain, a memory dressed as a future. Have you ever asked yourself why you stay? Why do you keep answering calls that leave you empty? Why do you explain yourself to people who have never heard of you? Why do you shrink in places that never grow with you? It's because part of you still hopes. I hope that if you try a little harder, love a little more, understand a little deeper, it'll change. But it doesn't. Because it was never meant to. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be released. And releasing isn't bitterness. It's clear. It's saying, I see it now. And because I see it, I'm done pretending I don't. Letting go is not the end of the story. It's the start of a truer one. The grief you feel, that's not a sign you made the wrong decision. It's a sign that you finally honored your truth. Because the real pain isn't in letting go. It's in holding on to something that's already gone. You deserve more than what keeps you in pieces. You deserve what speaks to your wholeness, not your wounds. And when you choose to release what no longer aligns, the world doesn't end. A new one begins, a lighter one, a quieter one. One where your nervous system stops bracing. One where your voice no longer trembles. One where your spirit says, "Finally, you remembered me." Because each time you let go of something that hurts, you send a message not just to the world, but to your unconscious. I will not betray myself anymore. And that's not a loss. That's liberation. That's a soul choosing itself after years of trying to be enough for everyone else. You don't need to beg for what depletes you. You don't need to explain your decision to walk away from what made you forget your worth. You only need to pause, to breathe, and to ask, what am I still carrying that no longer belongs to me? Because sometimes the most sacred act is not fixing what's broken, but releasing what was never yours to hold. So if you feel like everything is falling apart right now, maybe it's not a tragedy, maybe it's grace. Clearing space, making room for something softer, truer, more aligned, for something that feels like home. People don't just show up in our lives by accident. There's something mysterious, almost sacred about the way certain souls enter our orbit. Some arrive with warmth, with laughter, with ease, and some arrive with lessons, with discomfort, with the uncanny ability to press on wounds we didn't even know were still open. Carl Jung believed that relationships reflect the inner world, that every person we meet is a kind of mirror revealing to us what still lives within. And that idea changes everything, because suddenly, it's not just about them, it's about you. The friend who makes you feel invisible might be mirroring the parts of you that still question your right to take up space. The partner who keeps abandoning you might be echoing the ways you've abandoned yourself. The people you chase for love might be pointing to a child inside who still thinks they have to earn it. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. It's about seeing your life not as a series of random connections, but as a reflection of your own self-perception. And when you look closely, you'll see it. The healthier your relationship with you, the healthier your relationships become. Because self-worth changes the game. When you finally start seeing your own value, you stop waiting for others to confirm it. You stop mistaking crumbs for love. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who only ever loved your mask. And most importantly, you stop staying where your soul goes hungry. Because now, you know what it feels like to be fed. You've tasted the peace of your own presence. You've heard your own voice speak truth after years of silence. And you've realized, sometimes painfully, that not everyone deserves access to you. Some people only know how to love you when you're small, when you're pleased, when you're predictable. But when you rise, when you start choosing yourself, they get uncomfortable. And that's okay. Because your growth is not a betrayal, it's a return to boundaries, to discernment, to relationships that feel like breathing, not bracing, to spaces where you don't have to perform to be seen. And it's not that you stop loving people, it's that you stop abandoning yourself to keep them. You no longer ignore the red flags. You no longer carry the emotional weight of others just to feel needed. You no longer trade your truth for temporary connection. Because now, you remember what connection really is. It's not attention. It's not validation. its resonance, its peace, its mutual respect. And once you felt that, you can't go back. You become willing to lose what's misaligned in order to make room for what's true. And in doing so, you send a signal not just to others, but to your own unconscious. I choose relationships that meet me where I truly am. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. And from there, something beautiful begins to unfold. The people who see you really see you start to appear, not because you begged, but because you finally made space. Some people enter your life not to comfort you, but to confront you with parts of yourself you've been trying to avoid. You don't realize it at first. You just feel it, the irritation, the tightness in your chest, the way your jaw clenches when they speak, when they act, when they reflect something back that feels too familiar. It's easy to point outward, to say, they're selfish, they're arrogant, they're fake. But what if that reaction isn't about them? What if it's a mirror? Carl Jung called this projection the unconscious act of seeing in others what we haven't yet faced in ourselves. And it's humbling, because the truth is, we all do it. We project our unhealed wounds onto lovers, our unmet needs onto friends, our disowned traits onto strangers. We see our pain in others' actions, our fears in their silence, our shame in their success. And the moment you begin to notice this, something shifts. You realize that every emotional trigger isn't just about what happened, it's about what's unresolved. Someone's confidence makes you uncomfortable. Maybe it's brushing up against your own forgotten potential. Someone's anger unsettles you. Maybe it's knocking on the door of your own unexpressed rage. Someone's chaos frustrates you. Maybe it reminds you of the control you cling to out of fear. This isn't about shame. It's about awakening. Because a trigger is not proof you're broken. It's proof there's still something alive inside, something asking to be seen. You can't heal what you keep blaming on the outside. So next time you feel that sting, pause, not to analyze, not to judge, but to listen. Ask yourself, what is this waking up in me? And then be still. Because every trigger is a trailhead, a path that leads inward, sometimes into the past, sometimes into a wound you thought had already healed, and sometimes into a part of you that was never allowed to exist in the first place. But if you follow that path not with harshness, but with curiosity, you'll begin to see something remarkable. The very traits you once judged in others live somewhere in you. And when you can face those parts, not as threats, but as invitations, you begin to soften, to integrate, to understand. You stop needing the world to reflect only what feels safe. You start allowing it to reflect what is true. And from that space, your reactions change. You no longer feel pulled to defend, to attack, to withdraw. You begin to respond from awareness. Because now, you see the trigger for what it is, a message, not a threat. And that's where power lives. Not in controlling what others do, but in reclaiming what their presence activates within you. So if you're feeling triggered lately, don't rush to escape it. Sit with it. Trace it. Let it guide you to the places still asking for your attention. And remember, healing doesn't always look like peace. Sometimes it looks like discomfort. Sometimes it sounds like a raised voice or a clenched jaw or a tear that finally breaks through. But behind it all, there's something deeper calling you home. Not to perfection, not to performance, but to wholeness. Real self-love doesn't look like a perfect morning routine. It's not wrapped in affirmations or filtered through pretty quotes. It's not something you post about with glowing captions or tie neatly with a bow. Real self-love is quieter than that, more uncomfortable, more honest. It's waking up after a night of regret and still choosing not to shame yourself. It's looking in the mirror not when you're proud, not when you're polished, but when you're raw and still whispering, "I'm here. I've got you." Carl Jung said it best. You cannot love another more than you love yourself. And that kind of love, it doesn't start in romance. It starts in the dark, in the quiet, in the places no one else sees. Because here's the truth, most of us don't abandon ourselves in big, dramatic ways. We do it subtly. We say yes when we mean no. We swallow our needs because we fear being too much. We apologize for taking up space, for having emotions, for simply being human. And then we wonder why love feels so distant. But love doesn't begin with being loved. It begins the moment you stop leaving yourself behind. The moment you stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. The moment you stop chasing validation like it's oxygen. Self-love, real self-love, is a kind of rebellion, a refusal to keep living as if your worth is conditional. A quiet declaration. I'm not going to abandon myself anymore, not for approval, not for acceptance, not even for love. And when that shift happens, when you stop negotiating your value, the world feels different. Not because it changes, but because you've changed how you see it. You start walking differently. You no longer settle. You no longer tolerate what drains you. And the irony, you begin attracting people who reflect that same deep respect back to you, not because you begged for it, but because you became it. It's not about ego, it's about integrity. Living in a way that says, I am not available for anything that costs me my peace. Not out of bitterness, not out of superiority, but out of reverence for yourself. You no longer love to prove something. You love because you are full. You no longer give to earn your place. You give from overflow, not from scarcity. And when you do give yourself fully to someone, it's no longer in exchange for being chosen. It's in celebration of already being whole. This is the love we were never taught. The kind that doesn't sparkle on the surface, but anchors you deep within. The kind that holds you through your darkest nights. That doesn't flinch when you fall apart. That knows, especially now, I choose you. And maybe that's the most powerful act of all, not becoming someone else to be loved, but becoming someone you refuse to abandon. Again, and again, and again. There are moments in life that stop you, not because they're loud, but because they feel like recognition, like something ancient inside of you just remembers. You meet a stranger and without a word, you feel known. You walk into a room and somehow it feels like home. The conversation flows. The silence is safe. The energy aligns. And something deeper than logic whispers, this was meant to happen. Carl Jung called these moments synchronicity, not just coincidence, but meaning disguised as chance. a meeting of souls that happens when you are in alignment not with the world, but with yourself. But here's the thing most people overlook. Synchronicity can't find you when you're still clinging to what isn't meant for you, when you're holding on to relationships that exhaust you, when you're trying to make it work with people who don't see you, when you keep showing up where you're only conditionally accepted. There is no room for alignment when your hands are full of what drains you. And maybe that's the hardest part, realizing that sometimes we block our own blessings simply by refusing to let go. Not because we don't deserve better, but because we haven't yet believed we do. We think we're waiting on fate, but sometimes fate is waiting on us, waiting for us to stop choosing comfort over truth, waiting for us to stop calling chaos love, waiting for us to finally say, no more. Because that no, that sacred refusal to betray yourself again is what opens the door. And once the door is open, things begin to move. Not because you chased them, but because you cleared the space. You begin attracting people who speak your language, even in silence. Opportunities arise that match the version of you you've worked so hard to become. The right people appear not to complete you, but to meet you. You don't have to beg for their presence. You don't have to audition for their love. You just have to be. Because when you're aligned, when your inner world is no longer at war with itself, the outer world starts to reflect that peace. But it takes courage to let go of the almosts, the familiar hurts, the people you thought you needed. It takes trust to believe that something better will come when all you've known is scarcity. But better doesn't arrive by accident. It arrives when you stop betraying your soul to please your wounds, when you stop settling just to avoid being alone, when you finally say, I'm no longer available for what empties me. That's when the shift happens. And when it doesn't just change your relationships, it changes your life. Because now, you're not just surviving, you're listening, you are choosing, you are aligned. And from that alignment, life begins to mirror back everything you once thought you had to chase. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. You can feel it in the way someone enters a room not demanding attention, but commanding it through stillness. You can see it in their eyes, not aggressive, not defensive, but deeply grounded, like nothing outside of them can shake what lives within. That's presence, and presence is power. We were taught to chase control, to manipulate outcomes, to win arguments, to be seen, heard, validated. But the loudest person in the room is often the most afraid. Real power isn't about being louder. It's about being clearer. Clear in your worth, not the inflated kind that needs applause, but the quiet knowing that says, I am enough even when unseen. Clear in your values, so that no matter how the world pulls at you, you stay rooted in what matters. Clear in your boundaries, not to keep people out, but to protect what's sacred inside. Carl Jung believed that the more we know ourselves, the more we integrate the shadow, the unconscious, the full spectrum of who we are, the more whole we become. And wholeness is power. Because from that place, you stop leaking energy. You stop fighting for scraps of validation. You stop bending to every opinion, every expectation, every storm that tries to knock you off center. You become the storm's eye, calm, steady, unmoved. It's not that you don't feel pain. It's that you're no longer ruled by it. It's not that people can't hurt you. It's that they can't define you. That's the difference. That's the shift. When your power comes from within, nothing outside of you has the final say. Not rejection, not failure, not loss. Because your identity is no longer built on anything that can be taken away. You stop seeking power in status, in control, in image. Because you realize you are the source. You are the fire you've been trying to light in others. And when you live from that place, not to prove, not to dominate, not to win, but simply to be, everything changes. You begin to move differently. You speak with less effort. You choose with more clarity. And the world feels it even if they can't explain it. They feel your boundaries before you speak to them. They feel your peace in your silence. They feel your strength in your restraint. Because true power doesn't push, it pulls. It's not something you hold over others. It's something you carry within. And from that inner strength, you stop chasing. You stop performing. You simply become. And when you become that version of yourself, the one who no longer needs to be seen to feel real life doesn't control you anymore. You walk through it with a different kind of freedom, not because you've taken control of everything, but because you've stopped needing to. The path to self-worth is not linear. It's a spiral. You'll revisit the same wounds, the same doubts, the same patterns, but each time from a different level of awareness, a deeper breath, a softer heart. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means walking back through it this time with presence, with compassion, with eyes wide open. Carl Jung didn't hand us answers. He handed us a mirror, not to shame us, but to wake us. So I ask you now, not as a challenge, but as a whisper. What part of you have you silenced that's finally ready to speak? The child who just wanted to be enough, the rage you buried to stay lovable, the dream you let go of to survive. This is not a demand, it's an invitation to come home, not to who you were told to be, but to who you've always been beneath the layers, beneath the noise. You don't need to fix yourself to be worthy of love. You only need to remember. If something here spoke to you, like the video and comment below. Tell me what moved in you, not for noise, but for truth. Follow echoes of thought, not for more content, but for more clarity. Let's remember what it means to be whole.